Welcome, welcome. This is Union of Ideas. We are live on Facebook and recording for this episode on March 9, 2021. This is a special episode. As you can see, we have our girls around that we are inspired with their own all ages and all beings. Without further ado, I would like to pass this episode's panelist, Katerina and Mary.
Great, thank you. So welcome everybody. So in honor of International Women's Day, today we're going to talk about some fascinating women in history who played a major contribution to our society. So as we know that there's a lot of influential women in our lives, whether they be our mothers or sisters or grandmothers or friends, but yet there's also a lot of amazing women who've made great contributions to science, to math, to society, and in so many different genres. So today is really just honoring them and celebrating their, really celebrating them being trailblazers and helping us come together. So tonight we're going to talk about Mary, we're going to talk about Harriet, Emily, and oh my goodness, I can't pronounce this name, Hypatia. So I'm actually going to first start off, and I'm going to talk about Mary Wollstonecraft. So Mary is actually known to be, she's actually known to be the leader of feminism, or actually the trailblazer when it comes to feminism. So what I want to do is give you a little bit more background of who she was and how she came to be. So she was born on April 27th, 1759 in London. And her father, unfortunately, was an alcoholic, and he was very abusive, and her mother was also very submissive. So when her mother passed on in 1790, she convinced her sister to leave her abusive husband and her best friend Fanny, and what they wanted to go and do was live an independent life, where they formed a school for girls. It was a very modest income for them, and then her friend Fanny got married in 1785, got pregnant, and unfortunately she died. So the school closed due to financial hardship, and Mary was very heartbroken. So she moved to London to be a governess, but then she realized that the domestic life was not for her at all. So this is where she decided, you know what, I'm going to move back to London in 1787. She became an author and also worked as a translator and advisor for Joseph Johnson, who was actually a publisher of radical texts. So this is quite interesting because this is how her journey truly started. And she wrote Thoughts of Education of Daughters, and it was based off her experience as an educator. Now, Mary has written a lot of books and articles, and some of them have been anonymously written by her, but some of her works that are most popular is called The Vindication of Women's Rights, which was published in 1792. The reason why she published this book, she felt that as women, they were pretty much sitting at home and they were not occupying their minds. And so with them not being occupying their minds, they just felt like they weren't doing much. And so they would take out their anger on their children and their servants. And she even quoted them being domestic tyrants. And so to be all voted this, she felt that, you know, women deserved equal opportunities as men. Here's a quote that she did share. She says, "Strengthen the female mind by enlarging it, and there'll be an end of blind obedience." So she felt that if little girls were educated and they were given the same opportunities as men, then they would grow up to be more rational beings, and they would be able to develop their own characters instead of being placed in these roles that society had placed women throughout centuries. And she felt that, you know, women had the capabilities to do that. So as she wrote her book, I mean, she got some very great reviews, and unfortunately she didn't get some positive reviews either. So she moved to Paris in 1793 during the French Revolution. And there she met a very handsome American captain named Gilbert Ismay, and she had a baby daughter. She got pregnant by him. It didn't work, but unfortunately, because of that relationship, she tried to commit suicide twice, and from there she decided she needed space. So she took her daughter, and they took a trip to Scandinavia, and then later she came back to London, and she married another activist, and his name was William Godwin. What was ironic is that both of them, they were very progressive of their time in the 18th century. They did not believe in the institution of marriage, but somehow they decided to get married. So when her and William were married, before they got married, she got pregnant again, and that's which led them to getting married. And she had a second daughter, and her daughter's name is Mary. And then later, 10 days after the birth, Mary passed away. But her youngest daughter, Mary, is known as, even though her maiden name was Mary Godwin, her marriage name was Mary Shelley, who actually wrote the book on Frankenstein. So this is quite interesting. So, so definitely Mary was well known as being a woman activist. She was definitely a trailblazer. And with her being a trailblazer, she wanted women to have the opportunity to definitely look at their skills and being able to really strengthen their own mind. Here's another quote that she has: strengthen the female mind by enlarging it. Or sorry, I did say that, and there will be an end of the videos, but she also had another interesting quote where she said that men and women must be educated and a great degree by the opinions and the manners of society that they live in. And so her major thing was that, you know, as women, we being able to give them the opportunities and be able to grow and to learn and to really be able to tap into their own selves and build their own characters. And this is very unique because this is actually in alignment with Ursula Franklin. Because when we take a look at Ursula Franklin is really talking about, you know, getting down to our skills and knowing our skills and being able to contribute in so many different manners. And I just, honestly, when I was reading up on Mary, I just found her very, very influential. And I truly believe she is a trailblazer in every sense of the word. What was interesting is she may be known as the founder of feminism. Even with her being the founder of feminism, she also went through her own struggles, and what she wanted to see was a better world for men and women to really be equals. And so, as you can see, the picture that I have behind me is I think it's so true. And this is a quote that I really adhere to, and it's like, I do not wish women to have power over men, but over themselves. So really them being their own leaders in their own lives and being able to make the choices that are important to them. And then from there, they're able to move forward. So this is Mary in the nutshell of Mary. I mean, there's so many other great works and there's so many other great teachings that she actually has brought to her, to our gender, but also to society. I mean, and again, she was a true advocate where boys and girls were actually were in a co-ed classroom, and we're actually seeing that today. So I think she would be so incredibly happy to see that boys and girls are learning, and that their minds are being shaped and they're being molded, or hopefully not molded, but definitely they're being shaped to be future leaders and to be future trailblazers for our society. So, so James, I'm going to pass it on to you. I know you have some really nice things you want to say about your gal. So.
Well, thank you, Katerina. Really interesting to hear about Mary Wollstonecraft and you know, her trailblazing approach. And I want to talk about another trailblazer, Emmy Noether, who. And so I'm very pleased, you know, to present an overview and life of the work of Emmy Noether on the occasion of International Women's Day yesterday. So I'll just start with a brief overview of her life. So Emmy was a mathematician whose genius has had profound implications in the science of physics and continues to hold great promise for the future world that we're building today. So Emmy was born in Erlangen, Germany in 1882 and died an unfortunately short 53 years later in 1935. Emmy's father was a mathematician, while two of her three brothers became scientists, and Emmy shared in her family's passion for knowledge and discovery. So unfortunately, Emmy's was a time when higher education was almost completely inaccessible to women. And so through her teen years, her schooling focused on piano and grooming her for a career teaching English and French. Fortunately for the advancement of science and knowledge, Emmy's will to pursue her passion prevailed. So while she was not allowed to enroll in university, at the age of 18, she began auditing university classes in Erlangen as one of two women among thousands of men. She was finally allowed to enroll in 1904 and received her PhD in mathematics shortly after in 1907. So Emmy worked until 1915 at the Mathematical Institute of Erlangen without pay or title. And it was during these years that she collaborated with famed mathematicians Hermann Minkowski, Felix Klein, and David Hilbert. So seeing Noether's genius, Hilbert, as well as Albert Einstein, lobbied to allow her to lecture at the University of Göttingen, which she did without pay again. So in 1922, Noether was finally appointed an associate professor without tenure and began receiving a small salary. So Emmy would continue teaching in Germany until 1933. That's when the Nazis seized power and forced Emmy, as a Jew and as a woman, out of her university position. So with the help of Einstein, before the Holocaust was unleashed in her homeland, Emmy was able to leave Germany and teach at Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania in the US. So Emmy's will to inquire and to learn and to teach others was not overcome by the opposition of deeply entrenched values and social customs. This is one of the reasons that, as he reflected on the challenges of Emmy's time, Einstein called her, quote, the most significant mathematical genius thus far produced since the higher education of women began. So Emmy is an example of the truly indomitable human spirit that can overcome adversity. And this she did, by all accounts, with an ever-present sense of humor, undeterred by the judgment of others. So as soon as Einstein's revolutionary theory of general relativity was released in 1915, Emmy applied her specialty in the mathematics of what is called invariance to the geometry of space-time that Einstein's great theory had revealed. In the same year that the theory of general relativity was unveiled, Emmy proved what has now become known as Noether's theorem, which was published in 1918. So Noether's groundbreaking theorem connected mathematics to the physical distribution of mass and energy described in Einstein's celebrated theory. So Noether's theorem is now described as being of critical importance to today's emerging theories and discoveries in physics. Emmy's theorem begins with a fundamental principle of energy in the universe called the principle of least action. And this principle says that energy always follows the path of least resistance. So resistance arises in physics and increases in proportion with mass. So building on the principle of least action, Emmy's theorem proceeded to reimagine the physical application of calculus, a branch of mathematical knowledge that had emerged over centuries, beginning with Archimedes and finally encoded in the 1600s with the work of Descartes, Fermat, Newton, and Leibniz. So although Emmy had not trained in physics, using calculus and the principle of least action, she applied a most creative approach to revolutionize our perspectives on universal laws and constants of physics. Her theorem delivered to us a new understanding of fundamental principles such as Newton's third law of motion, and that's the law that says that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, and also delivered to us new insights into universal constants such as the gravitational constant that features in Einstein's field equations of general relativity. So the genius in Noether's theorem is its connection to physical symmetries, such as the rotation of a bicycle wheel, that makes it look as if the wheel is the same in all directions, and it connects the symmetry of that with universal conservation laws. There is, for example, the law of conservation of energy that says that energy in the universe is neither created nor destroyed, but only moves from one position in space and time to another. So this conservation law underlies Newton's three laws of motions and relates to the other conservation laws, which are the laws of conservation of momentum, of angular momentum, and of charge. So conservation law, such as the law of conservation of energy, is present when a physical system evolves at an unchanging rate over time. Another way to say unchanging rate over time is invariance, and mathematical invariance was Emmy's passion, involving the study of numbers that can be manipulated in various ways while they still remain constant. So what is it about universal conservation laws that allow an action, like dropping a stone to the ground, to have the same outcome invariably, no matter when the stone is dropped? A stone that's dropped now, or in the 17th century when Isaac Newton first formulated the laws of motion, or 300 years in the unknowable future, will have the same effect. It was Emmy who discovered the connection between physics and time, and that connection is symmetry. So for example, using Noether's theorem, we can see that the law of conservation of energy derives from what is called time translation symmetry. And this is another way of saying that the outcome of a physical action does not vary regardless of when it occurs in time. So to appreciate the importance of time translation symmetry, fundamental to Emmy's theory, just imagine what the universe would be like without it. It would be a crazy universe indeed without this symmetry, because we would never be able to predict the results of our actions. So how could we ever function with an unpredictable physics like that? So Noether's theorem states that the basis for each physical conservation law is symmetry. And this is perhaps the most imaginative part of Emmy's work. And I think maybe what drew Einstein to really appreciate her genius. So a traditional view was that the conservation laws have existed since the beginning of time. But Emmy's reimagining leads us to understand that first there was symmetry, then the conservation laws followed. So symmetry is encoded in the universe. Emmy proved this, of which we are part. And the laws of physics are the derivatives of symmetry over time. So the true power of Noether's theorem may yet be discovered in the very near future. You might have heard of string theory. String theory is a relatively recent and exciting branch of physics that many physicists are now pursuing in search of a grand unifying theory. String theorists use 10 and sometimes 11 dimensions in their mathematical models as they look for signs of what is called supersymmetry. They're looking for supersymmetry in combinations of energy that entangle in what are called strings. And strings are discrete pieces of energy that vibrate in differing frequencies and wavelengths. So Noether's theorem will undoubtedly also have a profound importance in the emerging physics and algorithms of quantum computing. So the quantum computer, which is about to revolutionize our world, will deliver unimaginable speed and accuracy far beyond the capacity of the computers that we use today. The important emerging applications of the quantum computer, for example, in the development of new medicines and materials, will require a deep understanding of symmetry. This is because the signal connections in the quantum computer are based on geometry, and electrical signals obey the principle of least action on which Noether's theorem is based. So having spoken about its physical power, I want to conclude with some thoughts on the philosophical power of Noether's theorem and of Emmy's revolutionary approach to knowledge. So the philosophical power of Emmy's approach relates also to the philosophy of physicist Dr. Ursula Franklin that guides us here at the Union of Ideas. So in some personal respects, Ursula and Emmy were similar. They were both women of Jewish background. Ursula was born in Germany, only a generation after Emmy, in 1921. And Ursula faced the Holocaust of the Nazi regime that led both women to eventually leave for North America. Both Ursula and Emmy were passionate about knowledge and about conveying that human passion in their teaching. The principles of symmetry, which Emmy encoded in her theorem, bear a relationship to Ursula's philosophy of technology. So Ursula explained how technology is fundamentally the way we do things. It doesn't matter whether the way is electronic or mechanical or manual. So the key is that however we carry out our technology, it affects everyone else. So Ursula might have said that our personal technology has a resonating effect. And Emmy might have seen that in the mathematics of resonation, in the mathematics of symmetry. And when we think about the science of symmetry, the basic idea being that what happens at one point in space and time would be the same at any point in space and time, all else being equal, it sounds a lot like the idea of justice that so inspired Ursula. So I've heard that Ursula was fond of saying, peace is not the absence of war, but the absence of fear, which is the presence of justice. So we can think of justice maybe as a state of equilibrium, being fair regardless of individual perspective. Maybe another way of defining justice is to say that what goes around comes around. And there is symmetry in that expression. So perhaps for both Ursula and Emmy, as Jewish women and minorities in their chosen professions, both enduring the irrationality of injustice, perhaps their great insights were inspired by the novel perspectives they took to survive in an unaccepting world. I think that justice in both of their legacies is a beacon to all of us in our search for knowledge, and for the wisdom and symmetry with which knowledge must be applied in a technological world. And so it's my great honor again to have introduced the ideas of Emmy Noether and her life on the occasion of International Women's Day. And so thank you for this opportunity, and I'll pass it over to Joel.
Thank you very much, James. And thank you, Katerina, for both your introductions. That was very fascinating. So I have the wonderful privilege of doing a quick recap on the Alexandrian Greek philosopher Hypatia. And just for a quick background story, while I was very much struggling with the tons of different women scientists and philosophers and that have made profound impacts on our civilization today, I chose Hypatia out of some funny coincidences that I've had over the few months, which involved a book recently that I purchased by accident by Catherine Nixie, who is a classicist from Cambridge University, as well as a really fascinating movie I watched, again, out of sheer coincidence, called Agora from 2009. So just for a quick background, we're going back thousands of years to between the years of 355 to 370 AD, which was around the time when she was born. And then unfortunately, she was executed between the years of 415 and 416. So she was essentially a Hellenistic, a Napoleonist philosopher that worked as a university professor from Plato's Academy. She lived in Alexandria in Egypt. She was one of the first mathematicians whose life was reasonably well recorded through other scholars. Her reputation was recognized as a great teacher and a wise counselor. Many scholars suggest, that's a key word here, suggest that she may have edited surviving texts of Ptolemy with her father, based on the title of from her father's commentary work. She was known to have constructed but not invented astrolabels and hydrometers, which were essentially very mechanical devices that she constructed from scratch to basically map out constellations of the observable solar system and the stars. So to figure out trajectories and constellations, so to speak, like she made these very fascinating mechanical works that she just stared up into the sky and then pointed out trajectory using these. And it was really, really, really interesting. But why she gripped me so much personally, why I took the challenge of representing a woman that goes so far back in time, was we're like in this area of Alexandria in Egypt. This is a time when culture was almost 100% patriarchal, so to speak, right? So when we look back at all of the great philosophers of the time, it was actually very difficult to find women representing the intellectual side. And Hypatia, what makes her presence so unique is that there are no direct texts from her directly of her work or any of her testimonies, but her reputation speaks from first or secondhand sources. So it was her students, it was other professors, it was other philosophers that basically her reputation as a philosopher, a mathematician, and an astronomer spoke in volume, so to speak. So it was the culture necessarily that said like how amazing this woman was. Now, essentially what happened at that time was Alexandria of Egypt was a very diverse and multicultural city, full of art, music, science, and philosophy. And Alexander the Great established, of course, we all know, the Great Library, which contained a whole world of collected literature, which is basically today's equivalent of Silicon Valley, Google, or the internet. Now, at this time, even though the city was extremely diverse and it had Jews and Christians and pagans and other occult practices, Hypatia didn't discriminate against anybody. The majority of her students, nevertheless, were Christians, but even though there was great turmoil and this was essentially the rise of monotheism to a degree, there was a great deal of hostility between religious groups and the government. Hypatia she had a very consistent and strong reputation of accepting everybody into the classroom. She never ever essentially pointed the finger. She just said, everyone's welcome and I don't want to take sides. Reason's going to win the day, essentially, right? But unfortunately, there was a Christian bishop named Cicero that was gaining so much political power. And of course, this is politics, so it's extremely controversial. So eventually, the rise of Christian monotheism started to clash with the Alexandrian Roman government. And the more influential and powerful Christianity became at the time, the bishop Cicero started spreading conspiracy theories and rumors that Hypatia was in some sense a witch, that she was influencing the government and she was causing all of these controversies and why there was so much turbulence on the political spectrum. Lots of these bishops were starting rumors that Hypatia, obviously being a woman, is somehow a source for spreading all of these all this injustice, so to speak. So there was a huge collection of Christian monks that unfortunately one day was running through the city, found her coming home from the university and kidnapped her off of her chariot and dragged her to a synagogue or a church and basically stoned her to death. And it was a very violent and public execution, but thankfully, even though the murder shocked the empire and the culture transformed her death into a martyr, because she was so loved and admired in academic circles that when people realized she was executed, they basically tried to make her up to be one of the academic elite, so to speak. So just simply because this is so far back in time, and men essentially were so dominated at that time, the fact that her reputation from other sources just spoke volumes to me personally. In the movie Agora, I would highly recommend to anyone that's curious about it. It is so well done. It's so emotional, and there's so many observations she made about the constellations that actually helped astronomers such as Copernicus and Kepler, making observations that slowly transferred the scientific mind from a geocentric model to a heliocentric model, if you will. And unfortunately, this is two conflating sources that I needed to check. But then, of course, this was at the time once Hypatia was executed, so was the destruction of the Alexandrian library. And the destruction of that library was so devastating that there's even a point in Catherine Nixie's book that said that, where is it, if you'll excuse me, classical literature helping to pitch Western civilization into a 1,000-long-year decline, just 1% of Latin literature would survive the purge of countless antiquities, art, and ancient traditions were lost forever. So think of all of the texts that we have through Plato and Aristotle and all the others, just we would have so much if that city didn't get purged, so to speak. And unfortunately, Hypatia was a martyr in that destruction of the city. So, even today and 100 years ago, she was, during the Enlightenment era, she became a symbol of opposition to Catholicism, as well as an icon for women's rights and a precursor to the feminist movement. So the for that and many, many more reasons, she will be very near and dear to my heart. And please, anybody who's interested, go watch the video. But that's the best I can do with her. And I'll pass that the torch on to Ava.
Thank you. Well, remarkable. And I am excited and honored to have Harriet with me, who has been a spiritual leader for me for a while now. Harriet Tubman was born in March 1822, and she passed away on 10th of March 1913. So actually tomorrow will be her death anniversary. She was a political activist born into slavery. Harriet escaped and made some between 13 or 17 missions to rescue enslaved people, including family and friends, using the network of anti-slavery activists and safe houses from houses known as the Underground Railroad. During the American Civil War, she served in the army. In her later years, Harriet was an activist in the movement for women's suffrage and women for voting. What I want to actually remark here is the stages that she went as a girl and as a woman, and how she is still our trailblazer now. And she's in 20 American dollar, her picture is on 20 American $20. So I think she adds more value to that 20 American dollars with what she did. She was actually named as Minty when she was first born, and she was born to enslaved parents owned by Mary Patterson, and later her son Edward. That means like she was owned by a person and then she was owned by another person. Harriet's maternal grandmother, Modesty, arrived in the US on a slave ship from Africa. Harriet was beaten and whipped by her various masters as a child. Early in life, she suffered a traumatic head wound when an angry overseer threw a heavy metal weight intending to hit another enslaved person, but hit her instead. So the injury caused dizziness, pain, which occurred throughout her life. She had to have operation in her later years in US after her slavery. And Harriet, after the injury, Harriet began experiencing strange visions and vivid dreams, which she took in her heart as signs from God. And she used those vivid dreams or images as like signs of her mission. And she didn't know how to read or write, but she knew how to read the universe. She knew how to read, how to find the Northern Star, and she would find her way. I have this image, and of course all the documentaries and movies or everything I read about her. So she looks at the star, at the Northern Star, and she knows where to go. Sometimes she would she would start up fake fires in the places that they never went. So she was never captured, or she was always followed by like human hunters in a way, but all her passengers, and she was always safe. And we can call her a member of neurodiverse population, because she was thinking different. She was seeing, maybe she was seeing another dimension, and maybe that's how she was able to see the potential of the underground railroad traffic here. So sometimes she would start from a point, then would go travel north with her people, somewhere around like 10 or 12 people. And then if she feels like they're in danger, she would travel back to surprise and like get rid of the people following them. And that's, this is another, I have another map. This is underground railroads that she was able to travel. And I have to say, my first experience when I heard the word underground railroad, I was born in Turkey. I moved to US, Indiana, and there was this very old building in the corner of the street that I was living. And one day I was curious and asked, like, what is this building? And a friend just said, that's underground railroad, like that was an underground railroad stop. And that was the first time actually I literally learned about that. And of course, I was in love with this woman who was almost like a CEO of Underground Railroad for 3 years. She carried, like she traveled big number of people, and none of them were, some of them wanted to go back. So, okay, so I have to, so she carried a revolver, a gun, and was not afraid to use it. So but she never killed anyone. She had to pretend that she threatened to shoot any escaped slaves who would try to go back because the journey was so hard. They would want to go back. They would just say, like, we're hungry, or just like, we believe like you're lost. Where are you taking us? So sometimes she would have to threaten her own people, stopping them from becoming slaves. And she said, I never left anyone back. And I think that's a huge, big thing about her. The main thing I am so amazed and I like dreaming about is about this picture I have here. Okay, so the wanted poster. So when this wanted poster was on the streets, she was actually like there was a money okay, she was wanted, so there was a okay, okay, you need to help me now. I am lost. Okay.
So I see there's a reward for 40,000.
Yes, and okay, there is a different way to say that. Okay, but I'll just pass that. So
put a bounty on her head.
That's it. Yes. Can you repeat that, please, Joel?
A bounty was put on her head.
Yeah. And right around that time, like imagine you see those posters in the streets that you are walking, and what is she doing? She is just like, she took 2 chickens. Once she realized like she's in danger, she takes 2 chickens with her and hides her gun. And when like people ask her like, okay, where's your paper? Who do you belong to? She would just like pinch the chicken and set the chicken free and run after the chicken and yell at those like at the people who are like gunned men, very angry gunned men on their horses. Oh, okay, let me get the chicken first and all that. So while she had the gun, she didn't use the gun. She used the chicken. So I think that's the technology, and that's what is remarkable and connects her in my heart with Ursula, which she just looked around and she remembers her mission, just like Ursula, and she does whatever she can with her knowledge. And I think just like Ursula did, and all your role models, trailblazers did, they all add their love and attention and caring to what they did. So I think that's a powerful experience. It's a powerful experience for me, and it's a powerful experience for us at the same time, us for now, because we are all inspired by her, by all these ladies. And the main thing I hear with all these four ladies are they were not only supporting women, they were supporting the community, and they were supporting understanding and humanity. Now, as Katerina had researched, Harriet had issues with his friends and his family. So we see these women who made big changes in the history, they had their own troubles with their own families or with their own environment. So just because you have a goal to live a good life as a man or a woman, it doesn't mean that you won't have any problems in your comfort zone. I think the main thing I enjoy learning from these ladies here is that they were okay to get out of their comfort zone, and they were okay with their own problems. They didn't let their problems to stop their mission, and they didn't let their families or the people surrounding them stop from making difference. Again, not only for women, but for humanity, for men and women. And I think on this Women's Day, International Women's Day, it's important that we all think about the humanity. Maybe in the women's perspective, the earth could use a little bit of a feminine loving and caring in a way, maybe. So it could be considered a good thing to put away the guns and pistols and take out some vegan vegan meals, maybe. I don't want to say chicken, but some form of a caring attention. So friends, this is how I would like to finalize, and we have a song that we would like to finish this episode. However, I'd like to double check with the time. Would you like to add any comments before the final song now?
I couldn't agree more with you, Ava. Peace isn't going to fix violence, food definitely will. I'm so on board with that.
Just to echo what Eva said, definitely these women had a lot of courage, and so you know, they were all stepping out of their comfort zone and considering what society had dictated for them and what they need. So hopefully we're seeing a lot of change in our world today, and hopefully we move in a more positive light. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to share this with all of you.
Very well said, and thank you for some fascinating presentations. I learned so much from listening to all of you, and the spirit of these women just continues to resonate today, and very happy to have shared the experience.
So friends, thank you. Without further ado, I would like to share our final song now, and I know we will all enjoy the lyrics. This is Stand Up, Cynthia Erivo. Enjoy.
face turned to the sun. Weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for my people. While the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night, that's when I'm gone.